It was a quiet afternoon in our house in Charlotte. The kind of peaceful day I had come to appreciate in my retirement. After 31 years of marriage to Eva, I had grown used to our routine. Nothing too out of the ordinary, just the familiar rhythm of our lives together. I was sitting at my desk in the study, sifting through papers that had accumulated over the months. It was a mundane task, one I'd been putting off for far too long, but I liked the sense of order it brought. Eva had left earlier that morning, mentioning she was heading to the grocery store and then meeting up with some friends from her book club. I didn't think much of it at the time, as she often had these little gatherings. There were no alarms, no reasons for concern. Just the quiet hum of everyday life. As I shuffled through the documents, a small piece of paper fell from a folder. I glanced at it briefly, figuring it was just another bill or prescription that had gotten mixed up in the pile. But then I saw the name on it, John Parker. My heart skipped a beat. It didn't make sense. I quickly scanned the rest of the prescription. It wasn't for Eva. The name wasn't hers, and the clinic listed on the paper, City Central Health, was one she had always said she didn't even know. We'd never discussed that part of town before. She'd always told me she had no reason to go there. My first thought was that it was a mistake. Maybe she'd grabbed someone else's prescription by accident. But the more I thought about it, the more questions piled up in my mind. Why was Eva going to this clinic? Why was there a prescription addressed to a man I'd never heard of? I felt a sense of unease building inside me, something that had been growing over the past few weeks. Eva had been acting differently lately, more cheerful, more put together. She was always on her phone, smiling at messages I couldn't see. And then there was the upcoming anniversary. She'd been talking about it incessantly, as if it was the most important thing in the world. She kept saying we needed to have a serious conversation that day, something that had to be addressed. I assumed it was about the usual things, travel plans, perhaps even downsizing to a smaller house. But now, with this prescription in front of me, everything seemed to take on a darker hue. I couldn't ignore the feeling that had settled deep in my gut. I grabbed my laptop, fingers trembling slightly, and typed in the name John Parker into the search bar. The results were quick. I clicked on his profile and my stomach dropped. There he was, John Parker, a successful young businessman in the tech industry. He was a well-dressed man, confident in his photos, posing at business events and in front of sleek company logos. He seemed to have it all. But more than that, he had something I didn't. Eva had been speaking a lot about the exciting events in the tech world lately. She was talking about meeting new people, feeling intellectually alive, things I hadn't heard her say in years. That's when it hit me. John Parker was more than just a name on a prescription. He was someone important to her, someone she'd been keeping a secret. I couldn't just sit here and wait. I had to know the truth. I needed to confront this, and I needed to do it now. The clock read 3:30 p.m. The university where John worked was still open, and I knew exactly where to find him. Without another thought, I grabbed my car keys and headed out the door. The campus was bustling when I arrived, students walking in groups with backpacks and coffee cups, absorbed in their conversations. I parked outside the humanities building and waited. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but something in my gut told me I needed to be there. It was as though the answers I was searching for were just around the corner, waiting to be uncovered. 40 minutes later, I saw him, John Parker, walking out of the building. He was alone, wearing a tweed jacket, carrying a leather briefcase. My heart raced as I followed him at a distance, careful not to make my presence known. I didn't know if he'd recognize me, but I wasn't willing to take any chances. He walked 3 blocks down to a charming little cafe called the Artisan's Corner. I stayed back, watching as he entered. I waited a few minutes, steeling myself for whatever was about to happen next. Then, with my heart pounding in my chest, I approached the window of the cafe, trying to stay out of sight. What I saw next made my blood run cold. Eva was sitting at a table in the corner. She was smiling, waiting for John. When he walked in, she stood up to greet him and they kissed. It wasn't a casual peck on the cheek. It was a kiss filled with intimacy, a kiss that told me everything I needed to know. I felt a wave of nausea hit me as I watched them, hand in hand, exchanging affectionate glances that I hadn't seen in our marriage in years. I felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath me. I couldn't breathe, but somehow I managed to pull out my phone and start taking pictures. I knew I needed evidence. I needed something concrete, something I could hold on to before I did anything reckless. I snapped a few more shots, making sure they were clear. Then, before my emotions completely overwhelmed me, I stepped back and returned to my car. I sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm my racing thoughts. The anger inside me was simmering, but there was something else. Clarity. A cold, biting clarity that told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't going to wait anymore. I wasn't going to sit idly by while she shattered everything we had built. With a deep breath, I pulled my phone from my pocket and called Jack Morrison, a divorce attorney I knew through some golf club connections. I had no idea how this was going to unfold, but I was done waiting. Jack, it's Daniel Harper. I need to talk to you. It's urgent. An hour later, I sat across from Jack Morrison in his office, my hands still shaking slightly as I explained everything. Jack listened intently, his sharp eyes never leaving mine as he scribbled notes on a legal pad. He was no stranger to difficult cases, but I could tell he understood the gravity of what I was facing. Daniel, Jack said, adjusting his glasses, you did the right thing by documenting everything immediately. Those photos, along with the prescription, are solid evidence. You have to keep your head cool though. It's going to get complicated. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. This was my life we were talking about, 31 years of marriage, a life I thought was secure, all of it threatened by a lie I never saw coming. Do you have access to your shared computer at home? Jack asked, looking up from his notes. We may need to check her emails, but do it carefully. Don't let her know you're onto her. Not yet. I hesitated. The thought of invading her privacy felt wrong, but this was no longer about trust. It was about protecting what I had left. My life, my dignity, and my future. I do, I said quietly, the decision weighing heavily on me. I never thought about doing something like that. But you're right. It's not about privacy anymore. It's about protecting myself. Jack leaned forward, his voice lowering. You need to act fast, Daniel. Your anniversary is coming up in 3 days. She's probably going to ask for a divorce, using that day to soften the blow. It's a cruel tactic, but it's common. She might want to make it seem less impulsive, as if it's just the natural end of things. I swallowed hard, the idea of facing this betrayal head-on making my stomach turn. But Jack was right. I couldn't sit back and wait for Eva to control the narrative. I had to take control. I needed to make sure that when this was over, it was on my terms. As I left Jack's office, the sun was already beginning to set. The weight of the situation was heavy on my shoulders, but there was something else growing inside me, a strange sense of clarity. I had been passive for too long, always letting life unfold without question. But now, I wasn't going to let this betrayal define me. I was going to fight back. I sat in my car for a moment, staring at the steering wheel, my mind racing. I needed someone else to know the truth. Someone who could stand by me through this storm. I picked up my phone and dialed Jason, my son. He had always been a source of strength for me, even though he lived across the country in Boston. Hey Dad. What's up? Jason's voice came through the phone, calm but laced with concern. He could tell something was wrong. I need you to come to Charlotte for our anniversary, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Jason hesitated, probably sensing the tension in my voice. Sure, Dad. I was actually planning to call and congratulate you both. Is everything okay? No, son, I said, my voice breaking just a little. It's not okay. But I'll explain in person. I need you to trust me and I need you here. Don't mention anything to your mom though. Not yet. There was a pause on the other end, and then Jason's voice softened. Okay, Dad. I'll be there. After the call, I felt a slight sense of relief. I wasn't in this alone anymore. Jason would be there to support me when the time came to confront Eva. I had to prepare, but I wasn't going to face this battle without the strength of my family. When I got home that evening, Eva was already there, humming as she prepared dinner. She was in a good mood, too good, considering what I had just discovered. I walked in, trying to keep my expression neutral. Hey, sweetheart, she said, looking up from the stove. How was your day? Fine, I replied, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. Where were you? I tried calling. I went for a walk, she said, offering me a smile. Needed to stretch my legs. I could feel the lie in her words, but I said nothing. I let her think everything was fine. The calm before the storm. We ate dinner in silence. I watched her closely, noticing how she was fidgeting with her wine glass, trying to make small talk. But I could see the anxiety in her eyes. She knew something was coming. I wasn't sure if she suspected I knew, but the tension between us was palpable. After dinner, she went to bed early, clearly trying to avoid something. I waited for her to fall asleep before quietly slipping into the office. I knew her password, something I never imagined I'd need to use this way. As I opened our shared laptop, I felt a wave of disgust wash over me. I had never considered snooping through Eva's private life, but now I had no choice. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to be left in the dark anymore. I opened her email account and started searching. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Dozens of emails exchanged between Eva and John. What started as innocent talk about literature and art quickly escalated to something much darker. There were intimate messages, ones where Eva spoke of feeling alive again, of finding someone who understood her in a way I never did. One message stood out, sent just that morning. I read it aloud to myself, my voice barely a whisper in the quiet of the room. John, I'm nervous but also relieved. I'm going to talk to Daniel on our anniversary. I know it seems cruel, but I feel like this isn't an impulsive decision. It's the end of one chapter and the start of another. I can't wait to finally live our story without hiding. I love you. I printed out the email along with the photos of them together at the cafe. I saved everything to a flash drive, clearing the browsing history immediately. I had everything I needed. Eva wanted to use our anniversary to end our marriage, but she had no idea what I had planned. I wasn't going to let her control this narrative. Not anymore. The days leading up to our anniversary felt like an eternity. I went about the motions of daily life, keeping up appearances for Eva. She was more anxious than usual, obsessively cleaning the house and buying expensive ingredients for a special dinner. There were fresh flowers in every room, a gesture I had come to associate with her, always trying to create an illusion of perfection when things were far from it. But I couldn't be fooled anymore. The woman I had spent over 30 years with, the woman I thought I knew, had made her choice. She had planned this, her betrayal, her escape, and she was trying to cover it up, trying to make it seem like everything was normal. But I wasn't blind. I was preparing for something different. I had the evidence in hand, and I had already taken the necessary steps. The money had been transferred into a separate account, and I'd gathered all the important documents, certificates, deeds, and financial records. Everything was organized, ready to be used when the time came. Jack had already started the preliminary divorce papers. But there was one more thing to do. I needed to have the conversation not just with Eva but with Jason, my son. I had called him earlier and he was already on his way. He was coming to Charlotte to be with me for our anniversary, but not to celebrate. This was a different kind of support. Jason arrived the morning of our anniversary, just as the sun was rising. He had a concerned look on his face, but he didn't ask questions right away. We met at a cafe near my house and I explained everything in detail. The prescription, the photos, the emails, and how I had found out about Eva's affair. When I finished, Jason sat there in stunned silence. His eyes were wide, disbelief evident on his face. I knew it wasn't easy for him to process. No child should ever have to hear something like this about their parent. But I needed him to understand. This wasn't just about me. It was about our family, and I wasn't going to let it be torn apart without a fight. Dad, Jason finally said, his voice shaking, I don't even know what to say. Did Mom really do this? I nodded, my throat tight. Yes, Jason. And I'm not going to let her control the narrative. She thinks she can end our marriage today, but I'm going to make sure she understands the consequences of her actions. Jason didn't speak for a long moment, and then he said, What do you need me to do? I need you here with me, I said. Not to confront her, but to support me. You're the one person who knows the truth, and I need you by my side. Jason's eyes filled with emotion, but he didn't hesitate. I'm with you, Dad. I've got your back. That evening, the dinner she had so carefully planned was set. Grilled salmon, asparagus, roasted potatoes, and a caprese salad. It was all perfect, everything in its place, but the air between us was thick with tension. Eva was sitting across from me, looking beautiful, more polished than I'd seen her in weeks. But her nervousness was palpable, even as she tried to act like everything was fine. The table was set with our best china, candles lit, soft music playing in the background. I watched her as she smiled at me, trying to act like nothing was wrong. But I saw through it. I knew exactly what she was doing. It's all lovely, I said, my voice calm despite the storm inside. Eva gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and we ate in an uncomfortable silence. She tried to make small talk, but I could see her hands shaking slightly as she held her wine glass. I said as little as I could, keeping my responses brief. When dessert came, a Sicilian lemon tart that had once been my favorite, Eva took a deep breath and set her glass down. It was time. Gregory, she said, her voice trembling slightly, I need to talk to you about something important. I looked at her, knowing exactly what was coming. So do I replied coolly. But first I have a surprise for you. Her eyes flickered with confusion. A surprise? I stood up from the table, walking toward the office. I returned a moment later, holding the folder I had prepared. I placed it on the table between us, looking her straight in the eye. Our 31st anniversary, I said, my voice steady. It's a meaningful date, isn't it? It deserves something special. Eva looked at the folder, confusion and growing dread taking over her features. What is this? She asked, her voice shaking. Open it, I said, my heart racing. With trembling hands, Eva opened the folder. The photos of her and John in the cafe were the first thing she saw, followed by the printed emails, the prescription, and the official letter from my lawyer initiating divorce proceedings. I watched as color drained from her face. She flipped through the papers, her breathing becoming shallow and erratic. The silence in the room felt suffocating. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes were filled with tears. Gregory, her words faltered and she began to sob uncontrollably. I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. Eva, I said, my voice heavy with emotion but calm, you didn't just make a mistake. You broke something that I can't fix. 31 years of trust and you shattered it. She continued to cry, her sobs racking her body. Paul means nothing, she cried. It was just a stupid fantasy. I was feeling old, invisible, and he made me feel alive again. I cut her off. You felt alive betraying me for months. You felt alive planning to humiliate me on our wedding anniversary. Her face crumpled with shame as I continued. You planned this carefully, Eva. You thought today would be the perfect day to end everything. How did you think this was going to end? She tried to speak, but I couldn't hear it anymore. I stood up, my anger rising. You've been cheating on me for months. You thought you could walk away today as if it was just an easy decision. But you were wrong. And now, the consequences will be yours to bear. At that moment, the doorbell rang. I excused myself and went to answer it. It was Jason. When I returned to the table, Jason was standing behind me, looking at Eva with a deep sense of disappointment. Mom, he said softly, his voice barely audible. Eva tried to explain, but Jason interrupted. No, Mom. There's no explanation. Dad told me everything. You were going to destroy our family today on our anniversary. You didn't even have the decency to be honest with us before making that decision. I placed a hand on Jason's shoulder, trying to steady him. Jason, please take your mom to the guest room. She'll stay there tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out the next steps for the divorce. Eva tried to argue, but there was no fight left in her. She stood up, walked upstairs, and disappeared into the guest room, her sobs echoing through the house. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I regretted my decision. I didn't. But 31 years of life, of shared memories, couldn't just vanish without leaving a scar. And as I lay awake in the dark, I realized that this was just the beginning. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee in silence. The house was eerily quiet now that Eva was upstairs. Jason had left early to grab some breakfast, and I was alone with my thoughts. I wasn't sure what to feel, anger, relief, betrayal, or maybe just a numbness that had settled deep in my bones. But I knew one thing for certain, I had taken control. And in doing so, I had freed myself from the crushing weight of uncertainty. I kept replaying the events of the night before. Eva's words, her tears, her pleading. I had never imagined that I would see her like that, broken, desperate, ashamed. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the kiss I had witnessed, the secret life she had been living behind my back. No amount of regret could erase the damage that had been done. When Jason returned, he sat across from me at the table, his face a mixture of confusion and disbelief. He was still processing everything. I could tell he was struggling with how to approach the situation, unsure of what to say next. Dad, he began, his voice soft, I don't even know where to begin. This is a lot to take in. I nodded, trying to offer him a reassuring look, though I wasn't sure if I was convincing either of us. I know, son. But I need you to understand. This wasn't just about her affair. It's about what she did to us, to our family. She thought she could control the narrative, make me the fool, but I wasn't going to let that happen. Jason leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. I get it. I really do. But, how do we move forward from this? You've got everything you need for the divorce. What now? I let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of the decision ahead of me. We move forward, Jason. One step at a time. I'm starting the divorce process today. I've already spoken to the lawyer. I'll be filing the papers soon. It's going to be a long road, but I'm ready for it. Jason looked at me, his expression filled with sympathy. I'll be here, Dad. I've got your back through all of this. His support meant more to me than he could ever know. But the truth was, there was still a part of me that felt lost. 31 years of marriage and I was suddenly alone. The house felt emptier now, even though Eva was still upstairs, hiding away from the truth. Later that afternoon, I called Richard Morrison, the divorce attorney. I told him I was ready to move forward with the proceedings, and he agreed to meet me at his office that afternoon to sign the official documents. As I drove to Richard's office, my thoughts began to spiral. This wasn't just about Eva anymore. It was about taking back my life, regaining the dignity she had stolen from me. But I also had to think about the future. My future. What was I going to do next? Where would I go from here? Richard's office was a small but efficient space in the heart of the city. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with legal texts and binders. It smelled faintly of coffee and old paper, comforting in its own way. Richard greeted me with a firm handshake and motioned for me to sit down. "All right, Daniel," he said, settling into his chair across from me. "We've got everything in order. The evidence you've gathered is solid. The photos, the emails, the prescription. Everything will work in your favor. We can proceed with the filing today and we'll take it from there." I nodded, feeling a sense of finality settling in my chest. "Let's do it." Richard pulled out the documents and placed them in front of me. I scanned through them, my eyes skimming over the legal jargon, the terms and conditions, the clauses about asset division and alimony. It all seemed so clinical, so impersonal. But I knew it was the right step. There was no turning back now. "Sign here," Richard instructed, pointing to the lines on the papers. I picked up the pen, my hand steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. With one fluid motion I signed the documents, my signature marking the end of an era. When I left Richard's office, the weight on my shoulders seemed a little lighter. The process had officially begun. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't going to let Eva's betrayal define me. I was going to reclaim my life, piece by piece. That evening I returned home, determined to keep my composure. I knew what was coming. Eva would confront me, probably beg for another chance, try to convince me that it was all just a mistake. But I had made up my mind. I had already seen the truth. And there was no going back. Eva was sitting on the couch when I walked in. Her eyes were red from crying, her face pale with guilt. She didn't speak as I entered, but I could feel the tension between us. "Gregory," she finally said, her voice small, "please, let's talk. I know I've hurt you. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I need you to understand. It wasn't about you, it was about me. I was lost. I needed to feel alive again." I stood there for a moment, taking in her words, trying to keep my emotions in check. But the truth was, I didn't care about her excuses anymore. I didn't care about the reasons behind her actions. What mattered was that she had betrayed me, and no amount of apologies could change that. "I don't want to hear it, Eva," I said, my voice firm. "You made your choice. And now I'm making mine." She looked at me, her eyes pleading, but I could see the realization settling in. This was over. The marriage, the life we had built together, was gone. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice steady. "It's done." Eva's face crumpled, but I turned away, unable to watch her break down any longer. I walked to my office, feeling the weight of the moment sink in. This was the end of one chapter. But it was also the beginning of something new, something I would build on my own, without her. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal meetings, paperwork, and emotions I had never expected to face. The house felt quieter than ever. Eva and I barely spoke. She stayed in the guest room, only emerging when necessary, like a shadow of the woman I once knew. It was almost as if she knew her presence had no place here anymore. The conversations we had were sparse and, when they did occur, filled with tension. Jason remained by my side, supporting me through this difficult time. He never questioned my decisions. Instead, he quietly took on the role of mediator, a bridge between his mother and me, though I knew the weight of the situation had changed the dynamic between us. I could see the pain in his eyes every time he looked at Eva. It wasn't just disappointment, it was a kind of betrayal that cut deeper than any words could express. One evening, after a particularly long day of dealing with the divorce proceedings, I was sitting on the back porch, staring out at the garden. I had spent so much time in this house, watching the seasons change, taking comfort in the predictable cycles of life. But everything had changed now. I had to remind myself that this wasn't the end, it was simply the beginning of something new, something I could control. I heard the door open behind me and turned to find Eva standing in the doorway. Her face was drawn, her hair unkempt, and her eyes held the kind of vulnerability I hadn't seen in years. "Can we talk?" she asked softly, her voice almost pleading. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to shut her out completely, to ignore her completely, but there was something in her tone that made me hesitate. I could feel my resolve weakening, but I knew better than to let her manipulate me again. "I'm listening," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Eva stepped forward, sitting at the edge of the porch, a few feet away from me. For a moment, we sat in silence, the sound of crickets in the distance filling the gap between us. Gregory, she began, her voice cracking. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't even expect it. But I need you to understand something. I turned my gaze to her, trying to maintain my composure. You don't need to explain yourself, Eva. You've already made it clear what you want. I didn't want this, she said quickly, her voice rising with desperation. I didn't want to lose you, not like this. I was scared, okay? Scared of growing old, of becoming invisible. You weren't the problem. It was me. I lost myself along the way, and when I met John, it felt like I could finally breathe again. I stayed silent, trying to let her words sink in. I wasn't angry anymore, just numb. What she was saying didn't matter. It couldn't fix what had been broken. I don't expect you to take me back, she continued, her eyes now filled with tears. But I need you to know that I regret everything. I made the worst mistake of my life, and I am truly sorry. I should have talked to you. I should have been honest. Instead, I let my insecurities take over, and I hurt the one person I cared about most. There was a pause as I let her words hang in the air. I had heard apologies before, but this felt different. Maybe it was because she finally seemed to be seeing the reality of what she had done. Or maybe it was because, for the first time in weeks, I felt like she was actually speaking the truth. But no matter how genuine her words were, it didn't change what had already happened. I know, I said quietly. I know, Eva. But this can't be undone. You chose to betray me. You chose to betray us. And now we're here. Eva's face crumpled, her tears falling freely now. I'm sorry, Gregory. I'm so sorry. I took a deep breath and stood up from the porch chair. I had made my decision. I was moving on, no matter how hard it was, and I wasn't going to let her pull me back into a cycle of hurt and regret. I need you to leave, I said, my voice firm but not cruel. It's time for both of us to move on. We're done here. Eva didn't fight me this time. She nodded slowly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I could see the sadness in her eyes, but there was also a sense of finality. She knew the truth, this was over. No more second chances, no more trying to fix something that was beyond repair. I'll get my things, she whispered. I'll be out by the end of the week. As she turned to go back inside, I felt the weight of everything that had happened sink deeper into my chest. This wasn't just about her leaving. This was the end of an era. 31 years of shared memories, laughter, pain, and love, all reduced to nothing but a few bitter moments and a painful reality. But as I stood there, looking out over the garden once more, I realized something. This wasn't the end of my life. It was the beginning of something new. A chance to rebuild, to find peace again. I had my son Jason by my side. I had the freedom to start over, to rediscover who I was beyond the walls of this house and the shadows of my past marriage. And most importantly, I had hope. Hope that, with time, I would heal. Hope that my best days were still ahead of me.